And tell us what you got about efficiencies.
Yeah, hey everybody, I'm excited to be here today. I'm going to kick our session off, and then I got paired with sort of the goat of farm efficiency, so I will be very brief before handing it over. Really excited to join all of you today. Just to get started, my name is Hannah Dankbar. I'm the local food program manager for Cooperative Extension. So I work all across the state, looking at how we keep the food that we grow and raise here within state boundaries, and how we can use food as a community and economic development tool. I'm very passionate about keeping farms in agriculture, and I know that that's a big topic here in Orange County. So again, I'm very excited to be here and have the opportunity to talk with all of you today. Just a quick note about this session. It is designed to be very interactive, so we are both going to give just sort of like brief talks, and then we are very excited to hear from you both questions or ideas and do some group think about farm efficiency. So I'm going to start, but do you want to do a brief introduction first, or do you want to wait until?
I'm Gordon Jenkins, 10 months farm with my wife Beard is right there. And after Hannah, I've got a slideshow with some photos, and we can do it however you like. I have some like sort of broad general principles I can talk about on our farm as we go through some of the slides, but this is very interactive, and also just ask questions, whatever you want to hear about.
Yeah, so just to kick us off, I'm just going to talk about some big picture ideas for things to consider as you think about how you can make your farm more efficient. And I know two big questions that come up around farm efficiency are both around increasing profits and decreasing cost. So we're going to try to talk about practices around both of those things today. So as you consider how to make your farm more efficient, it sounds kind of weird, but the first thing I like to talk about is like taking a minute to just stop and think about who you are and what you want your farm business to be. Because working towards your vision and mission for your farm is going to be where you find those efficiencies and best practices. Unfortunately, there's no one model farm that's going to work for everybody, so really thinking about your specific context is where you're going to find those specific practices that are really going to move the needle for you. These are some of the main topics that I like to talk through with people as we talk about farm efficiency. So the first one, thinking about lifestyle preferences. I always make the comment that I am a very introverted person, so if I were a farmer, standing at a farmer's market for 6 hours on a Saturday would not be the best fit for me, because that would wear me out. I would need a week to recover from it before doing it all again. So something like a farm stand or some other market channel might be more appropriate for my personality and my lifestyle preferences. Where I know extroverts exist, I don't really know how, but so a farmer's market is great because there's lots of customers to talk to, and it's like a big party. That's the type of thing you like. So the next thing is logistics and cost. We all know that there's lots of markets scattered across the state. What types of logistics make sense for your farm? Do you have the space to do a lot of packing and then maybe just like do a few drop-offs and deliveries? Or do you have a farmer's market right down the road where you can just sort of like pack up the night before that morning and go set up there? What sort of risk are you interested in taking? As you get into things like institutional markets, there's some food safety certifications that are needed. If you're selling direct to consumers, sometimes people don't like to be outside on market days if it's rainy or icy. So thinking about what types of risks you're comfortable taking on and what type of diversification can help sort of mitigate those types of risks. Also labor needs. Do you like managing people? Or are you farming because you like having some time to yourself just outside? What type of labor is needed to get into some of the different market channels that you might be interested in? Really taking time to think through all of those things is important. And then also the volume. Scaling up as you get more experience and get more familiar with your land is a great idea. What type of volume are you interested in selling to specific markets? Usually this takes several seasons to really dial in what works. So working really closely with your extension office and other technical service providers. And again, thinking about just like what works for you and your business and where you'd like to be can help dial that in. And I realize I'm going pretty quickly. We could talk about these in more detail. So these are specific questions I like to talk through with people when we talk about building a farm business and identifying efficient practices that work for folks. Again, thinking about your specific personality and what your interests are. Can you ballpark how much you're producing each year? Just knowing the total can help sort of divide up between different market channels. How much labor do you currently have? Can you handle more? Do you want any more? What skills do you have? Do you like online marketing? Do you not? Or do you want as much time away from a screen as you can possibly get? That might sort of dictate what types of market channels you look at. And also just what's important to you. Do you want that face-to-face interaction? Do you just want to try to increase your volume and want to have less consumer interaction? Thinking about what's important to you is really going to help you dial in what you're looking for. And again, we're going to hear a really great example of somebody who's made these decisions. And again, what goes into this, not just thinking about sort of like what assets you have and what works well, but also what boundaries you want to set. So don't know why the colors changed. But how far do you want to drive to a market, even if it means potentially driving further could mean getting higher prices. What delivery days are you interested in? Are there certain days of the week where you don't want to be out on the road or away from your family? And what amount of sales do you need to make sure your business is viable and growing in the way that you want it to? So having some boundaries can also help steer you towards specific practices or markets. A few more points, and these are just sort of big picture points. Diversifying market channels is a good idea to make a business more resilient. So I think when we talk about efficiency, we talk about sort of simplifying things and really dialing things in. We also need to take a minute to zoom back out and really think about what it means to have a resilient business, and having those diversified markets and diversified practices can help with that. Again, it may take a while to find a perfect blend. And again, as Chaz said, there's this really great culture of abundance here in Orange County, so really leaning into the farming community, your extension offices, other service providers can help you sort of work through that process. And also tracking data and information is going to help you make decisions. So I think in 2026, it's hard to avoid screens completely, so having some sort of like spreadsheet where you're just sort of logging things throughout the season can help you sort of reflect back on the season once it's over and make decisions about where you want to go. So again, I'm keeping this very high level. We're going to hear some examples soon. I was asked to highlight some extension programs and resources that can help with this. One is a website called our Farm Planning website. This is a screenshot of what the homepage is going to look like. Just a little teaser. All of our extension websites are getting a new design in about 2 weeks. So if you log on to that, things are going to look a little different, but still branded as the state. You can sort of see some of the topics that are on the menu. That talk about best practices for managing your land and planning your farm to be sustainable. If you're just dipping your toe into production, we have a small farm boot camp curriculum that is taught at our county offices. So if this is something that's of interest, you can, I guess, nudge one.
We've got one going on right now. Yeah.
And also Wake County is starting, I think, a virtual one in just a few weeks, so that's that'll fit your schedule as well. So these are some of the topics that are taught. Sounds like you might have an opportunity to jump in if that's of interest. And then we also have a business planning program called NC Farm School. I believe they are full for the 2026 year already, but there is a QR code where you can sign up for their newsletter to hear about future.
This one starts, it just started.
Oh, okay, great. And I heard it's full. It's
Yes, it
sold
is
out.
full.
Yes.
That's correct.
But yes, also helpful resources on the NC Farm School website. Again, that's more business planning, like economics, business support, and then the small farm boot camp is more focused on production. So they're meant to go together, slightly different things. All right, and now I'm going to turn it over to dive into some specific practices.
Thank you, Hannah.
All right, my name's Gordon. First, I'm going to check to make sure I know how to do this correct. I do. So my wife Vera and I, we have 10 Mothers Farm. Like I was saying before, we're in Cedar Grove. We're about 15 minutes north of here. If you'd like to come see it after lunch, there's a farm tour up at our place. We have been farming for 11 years in Orange County and 8 years on this land in Cedar Grove, on the land that we own. And I'm going to talk, I have like maybe 16 photos of the farm that I can show, and I can talk some about some of the kind of like our story towards making our farm more efficient, and some of the key points that I want to make that I think have been important to helping us figure out how to maximize the productivity on our farm. In the photos, you might see some things that are interesting and you want to ask a question about. In general, I don't have like a 40-minute lecture to give right now. I have some key points, but I would love for you to ask questions, and just as things come up, and I can answer questions and tell you about our particular operation and the ways that we found to cut out waste and maximize productivity on our farm. So when we set out to start our farm, let's see, there's a picture from 2 summers ago on our farm. Here's a picture of the team right now, or at least as of like November of last year. It's in front of some fall crops. When we set out to start our farm, we did not inherit land. We didn't have a lot of money to buy a big parcel, so we sought to buy the smallest parcel that we could, actually, and that we felt like we could still make a living at. So, and we didn't want to take on a lot of debt. Our goal was to sort of pay for the farm as we went. So we were lucky to buy land with friends, and each of us got our own little parcel. This is from the very first season of the farm in the fall of the first year. And I wanted to give context for truly how small our farm is. I mean, this was in 2019, so things have changed a bit since then. There's a house now that we live in on the farm. The small tunnels have been switched out for big tunnels, and there are 2 more big tunnels. But that gives you a sense of like just how small our farm is. You know, the farm sits on about 2 acres if you include the driveway and all of the grass and things like that. But if you just get down to the actual production space, like walkways and where we grow vegetables, it's 1 acre in production. On that acre, this year we're going to do 325 CSA shares. So every week, 325 households are going to get a box of vegetables from us. And then in the winter, we do 200 CSA shares. That goes until the end of February, so next week is our last week of deliveries for weekly CSA boxes. The CSA is pretty much how we sell all of our produce. Like 95% of our produce goes into the CSA. We don't do any farmers markets. When we have excess produce left over after we pack all the boxes for our members, some of it goes to a couple local restaurants and a few farm stands and things like that, but that's just like a little bit of surplus. And probably most of you know what a CSA program is, but it's where people sign up for a subscription for our produce. Many of them pay for the whole season up front. That gives some early cash flow to us and gives us a sense of exactly how much produce to grow, because those people have committed to basically buy all of our produce for the whole season. Then every week to all those members, we deliver a box of vegetables that's supposed to be like their vegetables for the week. We deliver our CSA to 12 pickup sites in Durham, Chapel Hill, and Hillsborough, and then some people pick up on the farm. We split those between 2 days of the week, so Tuesdays and Thursdays. And people sign up for like a whole spring, summer, fall season. That's 29 weeks. We take 4 weeks off in August. It's hardest on the farmers and also hardest on the plants, so hardest to have a good variety in August. And that gives us also time to kind of like reset the farm and plant everything for the fall and winter. And then the winter season is 10 weeks. That's basically December, January, and February. That's a lot of productivity for a really small space. I think this year, if everything goes well, we'll be able to do about $400,000 in revenue of our own vegetables off of that acre. So I share that to say that like we've really figured out how to get a lot out of a small space, and that's really our specialty, and it drives everything on our farm. Like that's the context, is that our farm is tiny, and in order to make a living for all the people on the farm, which is my wife and I, and then 4 to 5 other people who make their whole living from the farm, we've had to figure out ways to be very intentional about how we get the most out of that small space. There's a picture of what it looks like when vegetables are growing. You can see that we stay pretty organized and neat on the farm. And you can see, you know, basically every square foot that we can is planted, and we're trying to make sure that we're getting as much as possible. So there are kind of 4 areas I wanted to talk about, or like to highlight in terms of like the ways that we found efficiencies on our farm. Beforehand, does anyone have any questions about like big picture our farm? Anything that's said so far?
this isn't really, well, I guess it is a question. So CSAs is like graduate school, so you started with a CSA?
We did start with the CSA. We had experience working on other farms for 3 years before we started our farm, including 2 of them were CSA farms, and so we had some experience with the CSA. But it is a bit of a risk to start out with a CSA, because when people are paying you all this money in January, basically you're saying, I promise I can get you vegetables for the whole year. So we started out really small. That first year we were on rented land, and we only prepped about 1/3 of an acre, and we did 35 CSA shares. And I was full-time, and Beard was only half-time on the farm then.
And most of those were like friends of ours, so it also
Okay,
helped
that
to
was gonna
lower
be
the
the
stakes
next
a
one.
little bit.
Yeah, so we started out really small, and then just each year gradually went up to where we're at now.
Then when the bird you had to cross.
Exactly.
Why is it called 10 Mothers? Is that a name you kind of inherited?
No, Beard can say.
I figured there's a reason.
There's an old saying that garlic is as good as 10 mothers, and we just like garlic a lot. And I think we like the idea of like food as medicine and care.
That's good, that's fine, that's really good. Do you have that documented somewhere? I mean, like, is that on your website as far as, yeah, okay, cool.
Did you say you're delivering 29 weeks in the summer and 10 in the winter?
Yeah, the main season's 29, and then 10 is the winter season. Yep. Cool. So the first thing I wanted to talk about, what has been important for our farm, is keeping everything really small and compact. So it's an advantage we have not having much acreage, is that basically we can keep everything really tight, and it doesn't take very long at all to walk from one part of the farm to another. So if you're like going out to harvest and you forgot a knife or something like that, you can walk back in 30 seconds to the other corner of the farm and get that knife. And when you're hauling in produce that you're harvesting, let's say like it's late in the morning, the greens, you're worried they're starting to get wilty. We're not like out at a different plot, a quarter mile down the drive or something like that, waiting to fill up a whole truck to bring it in. We can just pick up that crate and walk it in. And it means in general that there's just less time spent like on footsteps walking throughout the farm. And that anytime you need to go get something, it's very close by. So that has been a major advantage for us in terms of reducing downtime, basically, for us and our crew on a daily basis. Since we're so small, it also means that our production is really compact. So like I was saying, you can kind of see how everything is crammed in there. We make sure we keep our aisles as small as we feel like we can while still making it possible. We make sure that every bed is fully planted. We pack the crops in basically as tight as we can without impacting the crops being so close that there starts to be disease pressure, or we have airflow issues and things like that. Basically, we just try to waste as little space as possible, even down to we try to have as little grass as possible because we want to spend as little time mowing as we can and things like that. So that has been one initial thing that we've done just in the layout of the farm and sort of how we take advantage of a small space. And this is a picture of essentially the whole farm. This is more recent, so you can see now there are more high tunnels, and there's our house, but you can see just everything is compact. You don't have to walk very far. The other thing related to sort of the size of the farm, oh yeah, you can see this is lettuce, compact, close together, trying to make every square foot count. Our infrastructure also doesn't take up very much space, and we have sought to make sure that all of our infrastructure has multiple uses. So when we first started on the land that we're on right now, we had been on rented land before that, and we had a CSA, and we packed our last CSA box on the rented land the first week of December, and we sold CSA shares ready and had to have vegetables ready to deliver by April of the next season. So we had 3 months basically to move our farm and start the new farm from scratch. And that meant that we did not have time to build a barn and a greenhouse for propagation and get beds ready and build high tunnels for growing and stuff like that. So instead we kind of just did it all in one building. And Luke, who's back here filming, he was there in the very early years and was an integral part of the farm. And we built this tunnel together that first season. So this is a high tunnel that rather than build all those different buildings I just talked about, we just built one tunnel and we put it all in there. So in this high tunnel, the first quarter of it is our wash pack, where we bring in and wash and clean and store and process all the vegetables. So you can see this is like our wash pack space. Vegetables come in from the outside, they come in that door. They get cleaned and prepped as needed, and then the walk-in cooler is just a couple steps away right in there too. So things can kind of move and flow through there and go right into the walk-in cooler. Building that high tunnel took us about a week. It cost probably a tenth of what it would cost to build all those different buildings. And basically, like from the get-go, for a pretty low cost, we had the minimum infrastructure that we needed so that we could grow produce and pack and deliver CSA boxes. So that first part is the sort of the wash pack, where produce comes in and also where CSA boxes get packed. The next little section of that high tunnel we turned into our greenhouse, where we start seedlings, where we do all of our propagation. So you can kind of see it right here. There's someone packing vegetables on the right side. On the left side, someone's seeding to get starts ready. And here's stuff with scallions and lettuce and stuff that's going to go out. And then the last part of that tunnel was our first big high tunnel where we grow tomatoes. So this is still that same high tunnel. This is the last 50 feet. We have soil, here folks planting tomatoes. So we sought, basically what I'm trying to show is we sought to have just enough infrastructure and make sure that even in our infrastructure, like every square foot counts. We don't have a lot of outbuildings. That also means we don't have a lot of stuff, or a lot of room to store stuff, so we can't get that much stuff. So we try not to like accumulate, lots of old tools and boxes and things like that. It has been an advantage having the boundary of a small space that we've had to keep things pretty tight and cut out waste wherever we can on the infrastructure side as well. And we have to keep things really organized too, because we don't have space just for like stuff to pile up. Any questions about infrastructure or like any of that startup infrastructure before I talk about production stuff?
So since you started with the high tunnel, did that mean that you didn't need fencing?
We do still need a deer fence. Yeah. But we didn't need a barn, we didn't need a septic propagation house and things like that. And this is still, this was when the CSA was 120 boxes a week. We still use all this same space and all this infrastructure. We've kind of maxed it out, but it's still serving our need, and we have not yet built a building to like move everything into. At the very end, there's a picture too. Since we do need a place to store our tools and things, we just put up a caterpillar tunnel, which is like a much smaller high tunnel that took about a day to put up. And that, for the last 8 years, has served as our barn, where we store all of our tools, where we store row cover, all the supplies and things like that. So again, we just sought to, basically buildings that we could make ourselves, because we're not builders, we're not contractors, that have served our purpose. And so far, a hurricane hasn't come and like wiped them out or anything like that.
Was the snow an issue or anything? Did you have any problem with anything with that?
Well,
With the roofs?
yeah, we do have to manage snow and ice on roofs sometimes. This high tunnel and all the big high tunnels that we now have we have made sure are pretty sturdy. They're from a company in Ohio, so they're built to withstand Ohio winters. So we don't, only if there's a lot of snow or a lot of ice do we really have to think about managing it for the most part. Probably the thing that has been most significant for us in terms of figuring out how to get a small amount of food out of a big amount of food out of a small space has been really dialing in our production. So specifically eliminating overproduction, making sure we're not producing too much. I would say that's really, really key. And also making sure that there's no place where there's underproduction, where we're not using our beds as efficiently as we can. So this is just a picture of, nice looking rows of arugula, just showing how we make sure, we really want every square foot on the farm to be producing a crop. And we want it to be producing a crop 3 to 5 times a year. So from one crop to the next, there's usually never more than 1 or 2 weeks downtime between one crop being finished and the next crop going in. In the summer, sometimes there's a longer window, and that's when we'll sneak in a cover crop between crops. But we do very careful crop planning, figuring out this puzzle basically of how we can flip one bed, harvest it fully, get a good yield, flip it to another crop that's fully planted, and basically just keep the beds constantly churning out produce as much as we can. We don't till on the farm. Our farm is so small that it would be hard to get equipment into these beds. But basically, when one crop is done, if it's something like arugula, what we'll do is we'll go through with a push mower and we'll mow what remains, unless it's been so fully harvested that there's just a little bit of residue. We'll pull a tarp over the beds, so that's like a silage tarp that many vegetable and flower farmers use these days. That covers the beds, blocks out any sunlight, and keeps the beds pretty warm, and basically composts what remains right in place. In the summer, after about a week, or even like 4 days, if you pull the tarp off, this bed that was arugula now just looks like bare soil pretty much. Maybe a light raking of some of the residue. And you can go ahead and replant it right away. So we haven't tilled the soil. At this point, we don't even really add fertilizer or compost between crops. We do those just once a year, basically in the winter. With almost no work, we flip that bed to the next crop. Sometimes if it's something big like tomatoes, we do have to cut that out and take it to a compost pile before we can replant. But even cover crops can be managed this way. In the summer, we do sneak in a cover crop. We might pull this tarp off, sow a quick cover crop, let it grow for like 5 or 6 weeks. We'll go through then, and usually we will just take a big bed roller and roll that cover crop down to flatten it, called crimping the cover crop. Pull the tarp over it for a week just to make sure that we fully kill that cover crop. Take the tarp off, and if we're transplanting something like kale or something that's got a pretty big frame, we'll just plant that next crop right through that cover crop without disturbing the bed. If it's something like carrots, we may have to rake some of the residue aside from the cover crop, and then we can just direct seed carrots right through. So those are just some examples of how we're trying to flip beds pretty quickly so that we're making sure we're getting as many crops as we can out of every bed.
What are the most, let's say, time-consuming activities, and how do you manage them effectively, like weeding, I'm thinking, or if you think about the whole process?
So, let's see. You can see there aren't many weeds.
No, not at all.
Yeah, that would be true in all the photos. We don't. Yeah, so we spend about 15 minutes a week, not even every week, weeding, I would say. And it's because of that system and because we don't till. And I would say it's probably the biggest advantage to not tilling is that if you're not churning up new weed seed that's buried deep down to bring it up to the surface, it's not going to germinate. So if you can stay on top of the weeds in the first year or two, once you've broken new ground, you're definitely going to have weed pressure. If you can stay on top of them then, you exhaust the weeds that are in those top 2 inches of soil. And aside from stuff that might like blow in on the wind a bit or like sometimes come in during heavy rains, our weed pressure has gone down so much that most crops never get weeded.
So you don't use any herbicides or do you use any inputs at all?
Yeah, we use a lot of compost. That would be our main input.
I guess I meant synthetic or chemical.
No, we're not certified organic, but we follow all the certified organic practices. Yeah.
And is that because you're, sorry, this one?
No, you got it.
Is that because you're growing primarily in the compost, or is it more of like you're using that to amend the natural soil?
We use the compost as a mulch, so things are getting planted directly into the compost. If we were starting the farm from scratch and we had the resources to afford a lot of compost, you could start out with no weeds if you could put down a thick mulch of about 4 inches of compost. That sounds like a lot of compost, but especially from a good composting company like Brooks, you can make sure to get a blend that is high in carbon and like a pretty coarse compost. So it's like a compost that's moving in the direction of like a good woody mulch, but it's still something that crops will grow in if you plant right into them. And if you never disturb deeper than that mulch, weeds will be very easy to manage after that. In our case, we weren't able to afford 4 inches of compost at the start, and so we did have weed pressure in the beginning. But every year we top off the compost on the surface with a 1/2 inch to 1 inch, depending, and we just plant right into that. So the compost is both adding fertility and helping like really increase our soil organic matter, which keeps the crops healthy, which keeps our yields really high, but it also does help with weed suppression.
That insect pressure, you manage that by rotating the crops within and not like planting the same thing in succession, or?
Well, this is a little bit heretical to say, but we don't practice crop rotation on our farm, which is really specific to how small we are and the type of growing we're doing. But we do like move crops around, but it's mostly based on when beds are available and the timing more than the crop family. And sometimes we plant lettuce right after lettuce and carrots right after carrots. And over the course of our years on the farm, our disease pressure has gone down, including in the area where we planted tomatoes. This will be the 8th year in a row where we planted tomatoes. For the most part, our tomato disease pressure has gone down too. So it's the opposite of what most people advocate in organic farming, and especially that I know a lot of larger farms on a like more traditional organic vegetable scale consider really important to how they manage disease. But in our case, I think probably because our organic matter is so high, soil test says it's like 10 to 14%. I don't really believe it's that high, but it is very high. Partly because of all the compost that we use, and partly because we're not disturbing the soil and the plant roots as they decompose, and also as they feed the microbes, like they're always building their organic matter. I think that when you're farming in this like hand scale no-till way, and when you've got your organic matter really high, my suspicion is that crop rotation becomes less critical as like a disease management tool. So it's not something that we practice. And it has not been a problem for us. And I know other farms that farm a similar way also, it's just too difficult on this tiny scale to figure out a crop rotation that would make sense. So we've sacrificed that in the name of in productivity, trying to get as much food as we can.
So how are you laying your compost? Or drop spreader, or how are you?
We have spread, I think I calculated over 1 million pounds of compost, and we've done it by shovels and wheelbarrows. But if you have equipment, and you could lay out your farm these days with some small scale equipment where you could use a spreader to spread that compost mechanically. We didn't from the beginning, and I think it would be complicated for our farm to change that over, but we've managed it just by hand.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I missed this. Are you all making any of your own compost, or are you just buying compost?
We do make a tiny bit of compost from our own crop residue and stuff like that, but we just use that in pollinator areas because we're not managing in a way where we can ensure it doesn't have weed seed. So it tends to be a little weedy. We put it in like habitat areas and put a thick mulch over it where that's not a problem. For all the compost in our beds and production areas, that we buy that all in. We get usually about 150 yards of compost from Brooks Contractor each year.
So which contractor grows?
Brooks Contractor is the main composting outfit around here.
So besides the compost, are you fertilizing the crops?
So we do a soil test every year and have fertilized based on that. In recent years, the soil test has come back saying that we're in pretty good shape, and so we might add a little bit of, like this year, a touch of potassium sulfate we need, a little bit of gypsum, but for the most part, we've built the soil organic matter up enough that just that addition of compost is sufficient. For heavy feeders, we might add something with a little bit of nitrogen, and for like greenhouse tomatoes and cucumbers, those are getting fish emulsion and stuff like that through fertigation.
That's true as you rotate the crops through.
Yeah, early on we fertilize between crops, but we don't need to anymore for the most part. Unless it's a really heavy feeder, we might put something down.
What do you know about the history of the land and how it was managed before you started working on it?
Not a ton. It had been in hay for probably, I think, about 3 decades before we broke ground on it. So it was pretty compact and low in minerals, but we've been able to build it up since then.
It seems you've done an amazing job with the land that you have and the constraint that you have. Based on where you are with your business part of the farm, will you expand?
We've maxed out our acreage, so
Right.
we don't have any room for more beds. And I think that we like that constraint more than we like the idea of trying to like rent land nearby. Because that constraint is what has led us to figure out these ways of maximizing our efficiency. And as soon as we basically divide up the farm into multiple plots, I know that things are getting a lot more complicated. We do buy in some crops for our CSA from a farm down the road from us that is tractor scale, mechanized operation. They grow like potatoes, sweet potatoes, winter squash, even broccoli, onions, things like that for our CSA. During the main season, I think that represents about like 7% of the crop mix, so it's still almost all from us. During the winter though, about 1/3 of the crops in our CSA boxes are storage crops from that farm down the road. And those crops are not very productive by square foot on a tiny scale like this. But on a bigger farm that has space and especially equipment to manage those, they can be very profitable crops. So that allows that farm to focus on what's profitable for them and us to focus on what's profitable for us.
So you're gonna sort of just, we're good.
We have no intention of getting bigger. Yeah.
Could you maybe expand a little bit on like how you guys do the crop planning process? Is it, you're doing it throughout the whole year, or are you doing it once?
Yeah,
Using
so
software?
we, we crop plan once a year. It's a very complicated and detailed process because the puzzle of figuring out the timing so that we have enough vegetables for this CSA box, in September, and that those vegetables have the time and the bed space to fit in, after this crop and before that crop. It's a big puzzle to figure out. We keep very careful data on our crops, and that's how we choose what to grow and when. Everything that's harvested gets inputted into what used to be a spreadsheet but is now an Airtable database, so that we have records from every planting and basically every bed, what it yielded over the course of the last few years. And we also keep records of like when we planted, exactly how many bed feet were planted, what day it was planted. So we have those records going back a long time now, and we use all that information to make decisions about which crops to grow, and how long they'll take, and when they'll fit into the crop plan, stuff like that. It's an annual process, but it uses a huge amount of data to feed that. And I would say that, at our small scale, that has been fundamental to how we make this work. We maxed out our acreage in terms of we had set up all the beds that we were going to plant. A couple of years ago, back when we were at 180 CSA shares, we're now at 325, and we have not added a single bed. So the increase from 180 to 325, which has represented, probably like 150,000 in revenue increase, has come just through crop planning, through getting better at making sure we're growing the right amount, and especially that we're not growing too much. So 1 August, I'm getting ready for crop planting that's mostly going to happen in November. I start pulling together all the yield data and looking at things, and I realize that we've been growing, 15 beds of summer squash for the window when we want to put summer squash in the boxes. But based on how the yields are coming in on a weekly basis, and based on how the orders are coming in from CSA members, I see that 8 beds of summer squash actually can meet that need and would more accurately reflect what CSA members want. So, basically by looking down into the really detailed data, I figured out I freed up 7 beds. Now I can plant those 7 beds to something else. And I've eliminated that overproduction. So we really seek that every square foot, when it's planted, that crop has been sold already. And when we get that full yield, everything that we harvest is going to be sold. There's no overproduction and there's no underproduction, and that has been really key to how we make it work on such a small scale.
Do you think you could do that if you sold to, say, restaurants or wholesale in regards to the, because from my background, it's when I go out to a restaurant, they don't want to pre-order, so I have to be growing it and then offer it. Do you find that would still work in that scenario, or?
I think you could make it work. It would be a little different. When we started our farm, we thought we would be 50% restaurants, 50% CSA, and it was clear from the beginning that we had a lot of demand on the CSA side, and that restaurant accounts were pretty fickle, like you're saying. And it was hard. 1 week they might want everything we had, and the next week they're like, oh no, we're good, we don't need that. And so, I think partly to make sure we didn't have an overproduction or an underproduction issue, we went in the CSA direction, and also just people wanted it in the CSA. I think you could figure it out. There's a farm in the mountains that's a little bigger but has a similar approach called the Culinary Gardener. He sells exclusively to restaurants. I think he has also figured out how to sell everything he grows. So I think it's possible, but it's certainly easier with the CSA because it gives you this really clear picture of I need to have these crops, these that are already sold, and so on and so on. I think if you were, definitely there are farms who farm in this really tiny way who sell almost exclusively at farmers markets. You can definitely, you know, especially if you keep careful track of your sales, you can definitely figure out how to fine tune this for farmers market sales. And wholesale would be the same way if you had like a, you know, you knew, oh, I'm going to sell this many cases to this store, and so on and so on. Restaurants might be the toughest.
Can you talk a little bit about water management and how you irrigate and that sort of thing?
Yeah, so on our farm, irrigation is really, really important because we need all the crops to have the moisture so that they will grow like in the time frame that we want them to. So we irrigate off of 2 wells actually, because our first well wasn't very good. That well actually doesn't even really feed the farm anymore. It's all off of a well. 40% of our beds are in high tunnels, so in there the irrigation is exclusively off of a well. In order to make it as efficient as possible, all the irrigation setup is permanent. So we're never finished with the crop and pulling the irrigation out. Because we don't till, every single bed has sprinklers set up that can reach it. Like every field block has sprinklers that are just permanently in place. We never take them out. Every high tunnel has overhead sprinklers that are just permanently there. We never remove them. Every bed has header pipe and drip tape that's just permanently there. When we need to prep a bed, we just move the drip tape out of the way. We don't even disconnect it. We're just really trying not to spend any time doing that, like changing irrigation. Every single block of the farm is on a timer. I think it's like 27 timers in total. And so it takes a little bit of work to set up those timers, but once they're running, I don't have to spend nearly as much time managing the irrigation. The farm just kind of like waters itself. If it rains, I'll go in and I'll make sure all the field timers are off and things like that. But we sought to have it be as permanent as possible so we have to think about it as little as possible.
When you're making seed selection, is it when the shortest time that it will be ready for harvest, or are there other criteria more important?
Definitely other criteria are important as well. I mean, a crop that's like heavy yielding and resilient in our climate is really important. We do a survey of our CSA members every year to get a sense of what they want. So we have sort of like ratings for every crop that we've gotten from our CSA members. We also, our CSA boxes are customizable, so it's not just that we say here are the 7 vegetables you're going to get. We say here it's like the default box that we'll pack for you, but then over the course of the weekend, CSA members can go in and basically go into like an online store and make changes to their box. So it makes things a little more complicated on our end, but it also means that every single week we have data that says this is what our CSA members want. So we've used that data to really fine-tune the crop mix and get a sense of what they're interested in. So that is also, what they want is a big factor too in how we choose what we grow. Let's see, so that's seeding carrot beds into, that was cover crop residue that got raked aside. And you can see the soil is very dark. That's the compost mulch. That's right on the surface. Let's see. I guess I can talk about that. You can see, our crop planting is very fine-tuned. So sometimes we're planting, half beds of a crop, or even a third beds of a crop. So this just gives you kind of a picture of like the tapestry of all the crops on the farm. Because of the careful crop planting we're doing.
It's beautiful. Your farm is really beautiful.
Well, thank you. The pictures are beautiful because here my wife is.
Yes.
Let's see. This is in the winter after compost has been spread. You can see we actually take the time to also mulch the aisles with wood chips. That does help keep weeds from growing up in the aisles, but even more importantly, it prevents erosion. Like even during Chantal, these beds didn't erode. We got 11 inches in 7 hours. And that's, there's not a place for water to start to wash across the beds, and also because the organic matter is so high that the soil absorbs a lot of water. Those wood chips too, it's interesting, they definitely add some special sauce to the beds. Like when we're cutting out eggplant, the eggplant roots, rather than going straight down, a lot of the roots go straight and make a beeline for the wood chips. So there's moisture or maybe some kind of fungal activity or nutrients that they're really interested in the wood chips. So It's a lot of work to spread wood chips. We do it once a year, but it is a lot of labor goes into this farm. We have very low equipment costs, but we have very high labor costs. It's a very human scale farm. But so we take the time to spread wood chips once a year at the same time we spread compost. And thus far, it definitely still seems worth it. And it's a major part of how we keep any weeds from growing too.
And I'm sorry if it's repetitive, when do you guys spread that?
We do that in the winter. Basically right now is like heavy compost spreading season.
Got it.
Can you talk a little bit about data entry?
Yeah, so the way that we do it, we have sometimes used like Google Forms that anyone on the farm could use to input, say like, today I harvested tomatoes, these are the varieties, and this is the weight per variety I got. But at this point we found it easier, so we harvest most days of the week, but we have sort of like 2 big harvest cycles for Tuesday CSA deliveries and Thursday CSA deliveries. So our big harvest days are Mondays and Wednesdays. And before that, I print out the harvest list, and I can just download that harvest list basically from the software we use to manage the CSA, where people have said like, no, I don't want tomatoes, I do want kale, or whatever it might be. I can take the numbers out of that software, I can turn it into a harvest list that tells everyone on the team what to harvest, how much, where to get it, any notes about it, and so on. And then so that harvest list has basically all the data of what we're gonna harvest. And if someone goes out to harvest arugula, it says to get 40 pounds, they got 45, they just write that down. And then after the harvest is all done, one person who's like the harvest lead for our farm, they just take that information and they input it into the database online so that it's accessible from that farm. So that's how we get all the harvest data. And then I just keep track each week of like what we planted and how much and so on and so on. Does that answer your question?
Yes, the only thing that confuses me is that we sell primarily to farmers markets. And CSA is we only have 8 or 10. But we do it visually. We took, so many bags of this or so many crates of that, and we came home with 1 crate or that kind of stuff, not numerical.
Yeah, for doing what we're trying to do, if I were in that situation, I would probably be trying to keep careful numbers, both of what's harvested and then also what comes home from markets, so I got a sense of what is sold. Or I know other farms that are now using like point of sale systems at their farmers markets, and then basically their receipts keep track of that information for them. But that's complicated too.
Can you talk a little bit about your labor? Like how do you find folks, what kind of experience do they have, and how long do they stay around?
Yeah, so how we find folks is sometimes word of mouth, or sometimes we'll put out a job description, basically the same way that other farms do around here, like through the local listservs and things like that. We have a pretty big presence on Instagram too, so we can put out a job description that way. We have had we've been pretty fortunate to have people mostly stick around for a while. We've had 2 people stick around for 5 years, 1 for 6. Right now in the crew, 1 person's been there for 5 years. Several are in year 2 or maybe year 3. I think a big part of that is that our jobs are year-round. So the winter CSA means that there's work to do and also revenue coming in all winter, so we're able to keep people on all winter. And honestly, winter production for us is our least profitable time, but it's really important to us that it keeps everyone employed all winter, so that's almost more the benefit of winter production for us. We seek to involve everyone on the farm. We do like a weekly farm walk with the whole crew, 1 hour on Friday mornings where we walk through the whole farm, and that's when we decide what's going to go in the CSA boxes, but it's also like an opportunity for the whole crew to get on the same page about what's going on the farm and ask questions and things like that. And we have sought to basically try to pay everyone a decent wage or a living wage. When there was Orange County living wage certification, we were certified. That program doesn't exist anymore, so I can't say that we're certified living wage, but we try to provide jobs that are as decent as possible, and we basically pay ourselves that amount too. One funny thing about being a CSA farm is that basically when we're selling CSA shares, and we know that we're announcing those shares to everyone who's going to be like our partner in the farm for the whole year, we actually just send our budget to them too, which has like all the information about how much money everyone's making and where all the money's going and stuff like that. And we say like, hey, this year the box of vegetables is $38 a week. The price is going up $1 from the year before. If you want to look at the numbers, here's the spreadsheet and so on. So we share all that information, and it, no one's ever said like, oh man, now that I see the spreadsheet, I don't want to CSA share anymore. In fact, more people are like, oh, can I give a little extra money to help people who can afford the CSA share and stuff like that. So it's allowed like a kind of openness and helped us develop a level of trust with our customers too. I think we're just about finished. I'll take one last question, but I could also linger and answer questions too. Let's try to do 2 fast questions.
What were y'all's combined backgrounds to get you to this?
Neither Veer and I, we didn't grow up farming, either of us, but we both just fell in love with food, and that kind of led us to farming. We spent 3 years working for other farms, so we kind of saw that as like our training or like farming grad school. The farms were in California and Maine, and then when we moved down here, we worked for 2 years at Maple Spring Gardens, worked in Dawson, and before we started on the farm.
So I just got a quick question. How many pounds of cucumbers you get out of that new house?
How many pounds of cucumbers? Do I know it off? I can pull up a spreadsheet on my phone. Off the top of my head. All right, no, I can figure this out. So this tunnel is 8 beds. We probably will get 3,200 pounds.
And that tunnel is 50 foot long, so it's the other side of it.
Yeah. All right, one last really quick question.
This has really been inspirational. I'm a realtor and I help young people try to find land, and now you can do this on a smaller scale. You don't have to have a huge place.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing this.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
It's still very hard though.
It was never easy.
Let's give our speakers a round of applause.